Good evening and welcome to DarkHour Paranormal. I am your host, Michael Roser. And first and foremost, I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening, having Jared Murphy back for the fourth appearance here on the show. You've got to know there's something special about this individual, that we've had 4 chances to sit down and converse. And of course, we'll be talking a little bit tonight about what to expect towards the end of the month in respect to behind the scenes and upcoming projects. If any one of you have missed the last interview I did with Jared Murphy, there is a brief outline in there in respect to some thoughts about what might come next. So, with that being said, once again, I thank all of you for being here tonight. I know that I took a small hiatus, and for those of you who have not caught some of the recent shows that I have been a part of lately here, I'm going to explain this very quickly in the most YouTube-friendly way. So I have a handful of roommates here and essentially a family that lives with me. One of my roommates there, he went to work and unfortunately caught that one thing that we're all trying to avoid. Now, even though he was very careful and took all the necessary precautions, unfortunately, the oldest and eldest person in our home contracted this as well, which eventually landed them in the hospital. Now, the good thing to say is that he does seem to be recovering, although the attitude is a little aggressive. But hey, I can understand given what this guy has gone through. Personally, I am okay. But that being said, I have been stuck in certain ways. And of course, mentally and emotionally, there's a lot that goes into that. So I just wanted to give a brief explanation as to why I haven't been here on DarkHour Paranormal. And you may have seen me on many different other forums, but in order to put together something like this, I had to get through a few things. So I want to thank you guys for being here once again and appreciate your patience and dedication to DarkHour Paranormal. Without further ado here, we have a list of things to talk about this evening. We'll see what we get through, and of course what we don't, we can always save for the next show. And if anybody has a question, please put it in caps in the chat. I will do my best to interact. I know this has been a hot topic lately, and I will do again my best to interact with you guys and get every question up here on the board, because tonight is essentially a conversation. Jared is a very versed individual in many different aspects of the field. Those who have seen him before know this. Of course, he is associated with Conflict Radio. I definitely implore you on your free time to go and check out some of Conflict Radio's fantastic interviews, of which Jared has been a part of, sitting Shiva with Conflict. Fantastic time. Of course, I was on his show as well. All right, that's enough of me. Let's get going here, guys. Hey, Jared, how you doing tonight, my friend?
I am doing great. I am so sorry to hear about your situation, because I was there over Thanksgiving personally.
Really? So you went through something too?
Yeah. Not that we're not mentioning it, but
right.
And I was not tested. However, it was wonderful. I'm a Scotch drinker, and so I got sick. Took the proper precautions. Stayed home, but I could not taste my Scotch for a week.
Oh, that's weird.
No, couldn't smell, couldn't taste. And there's only one thing out there right now that induces that, and allegedly. And right now I felt like I had mono for about a week. And then like about 7 days in, I lost my sense of smell and taste. And what was weird was my sense of smell came back first, but I still couldn't taste. And then after day 7, I could taste like 10-15%. Day 8, I could taste about 20-30%. And by day 9, I'm talking about from the date I lost my sense of taste to the time it came back. And that part was freaky, where you're like, oh my gosh, am I going to lose this sense?
Yeah, well,
permanent.
it's very curious. Anybody who, there was only 2 people who actually ended up dealing with this over the last few weeks here to a month. And both of them really were pretty asymptomatic for a while, save for the more elderly individual who eventually started having complications, but nobody really reported any loss of taste or any of those other things that are usually attributed to that. Before we go on very quickly, I just want to acknowledge Knowledge 888. Thank you very much for the $5 super chat, my friend.
Nice.
I cannot say what you've written, and I say this with entire respect here. Please, if you could just sort of covertly talk about what we're mentioning here,
Yep.
it's better for the algorithm, and
Yep.
that's where we can start there. But I thank you very much. He says, this is the Great Reset. It's a blue book. The virus is the news they are getting paid millions to lie about to the public. Now, that may be the case, and as much as I'd like to discuss this a little bit further, I know we don't have the platform right now to do it, but Knowledge, thank you very much for that super chat, my friend. I very much appreciate it. And just because this is something that we should do once in a while, I'm just going to shout out a few people here that I see in the chat just to acknowledge you. I got Area 503. Guys, if you're not familiar with Area 503, he is one of the great UFO analyzers, and that is definitely my opinion. I believe there are many out there who would agree. Please check out his channel. We have him coming on April 1st, and that's going to be a fantastic show. You guys are going to love what's in store for next with him. So Area 503, I have Dr. Z Smith. Thank you for being here, brother. Mike Johnson, welcome to the show. Cashew Gesundheit, my long-lost friend who I very rarely get a chance to reach out to. I'm sorry. I appreciate you here. Thank you. Mikey Jamatra, Gematria, sorry, I said that incorrectly. Renee Cruz, I see you everywhere, my friend. And of course, we cannot forget Valerian the Mac. I hope you're enjoying your new blue wrench, buddy. And welcome to the club. All right. And if I'm missing you guys here, sorry, but we're going to keep going. Lee Bodge, thank you for being here. If I missed you, we're going to keep going on, but I wanted to take just a moment. Okay. So,
that's great.
That's interesting. And maybe you and I will talk a little bit further about this on off the camera, we'll say. But let's get into our subject matters here at hand. I'm very excited to kind of start talking to you about some of these things. So the last time we were sitting together, I think we ended off talking about the base in Dulce, New Mexico, and the Dulce Wars and so forth. Now, this next question and topic that we're going to go into is not necessarily of the same time period, but that being said, it certainly could be considered when we're talking about what we're getting into next here. So my question is this, okay? If Eisenhower was truly the last debriefed president in the way of ET presence, to what degree do you think every president that came after had knowledge of this subject? Now, before you answer that, I'm going to acknowledge that the 2 presidents before Eisenhower most certainly had some involvement in understanding what technology was available or any sort of ET interaction. Now, that being said, I think at first they may not have known really legitimately what they had in their hands. As time went on, I think they pretty much figured that out by about 1954, when the supposed treaty, which I could never remember the name of, was signed, allegedly, that we could be abducted in exchange for technology. All right, Jared, what are your thoughts on this, my friend?
You've
been a while. I've been away. Sorry.
Yeah, look at this. You got to hit the ground. Run. This is just, I had no idea you had gone radio dark. So here we are. And hello to Renee, by the way, because Renee is one of the blue wrenches on Conflict.
He's one of the greats.
Yeah, this is a really interesting point to the whole, like what this disclosure that's coming. One of my complaints about all of it is, are they just going to re-release the CIA docs that just came out, the ones that just came out like a year and a half ago, 19 months or whatever it was, where, there was that big disclosure and it was CIA, it was documents that, I mean, are they just going to repackage it? And are we really going to hear anything new? And a friend of mine who's very good, who has worked on bills and legislation, he looked in detail at what they are required to release that's coming out. And the requirement is really very specific to dates and times of sightings. Mm-hmm. There's no requirement within the language that says you're going to talk about this president and you're going to talk about this incident. You're going to talk about this contract with this alien, whatever. And so, and one of the things I want to back up right away and say is we're using the word alien or
Mhm.
UFO, and we assume, outer, not earthly. And again, obviously, the premise of my book is that it's really an advanced human race. I frequently do not discuss this enough and say, okay, yeah, they had genetic technology and they could easily mutate the human gene into whatever they want to look like. Just that this is a premise and the singularity is near about us developing nanotechnology and ultimately being able to change out organic matter, change out like every cell in the body, depending on the organ. 3 to 6 months, you're a new person. And then there's some science out there that says, well, some cells last up to a year. But the reality is that if we don't see each other for 6 months to a year, we're literally a completely different person. So there's an argument that says the human soul lives, outside of its actual cellular material, and genetic memory lives also within that aurora, that magnetic field around us, and the collective human consciousness. That all of it is connected. And so when we say alien met with the president, what we're actually saying is a higher functioning species that lives, and or a higher conscious human that lives on this planet and has always lived on this planet or lived here for a very long time, connected with the president. And after Eisenhower, after that admission of, hey, there was contact. And again, there's nothing that tells our ancient relatives that, well, look, we got to disclose that we're not actually aliens. There's always this assumption that they're aliens. There's always an assumption. Yet again, all the things we've talked about in the past, in the last not just 4 episodes, but our private conversations, and then what's completely relevant, of course, in the book and all our other dialogues, is that either, yeah, we are visited, which is totally possible, but the likelihood of the actual group of people making agreements is because since World War II, we have developed not just nuclear technology, but it really wasn't until the modern age that we had technology and listening devices that would allow us to likely hear what these people are doing underground, whether it's underground, underwater. There is a number of ways that they could be interacting with us. And all along, the oldest institution on earth is the Roman Catholic and the Orthodox, like the Greek Orthodox Church. I
Mhm.
mean, the oldest popes, the oldest faith on earth. We are talking about groups that could easily have had the access to not only find and not just destroy like the Mayan records and the things that happened as the conquistadors came, but they could really radio dark the contact and keep it within presidential and government or gray state circles. So what does that look like? Do we now know, since other things we can't chat about, uh, is it possible that Valerian, the Mac is back? Thank you. So I like the numbers. So still, what we have is a group of people that are living amongst us that are likely us, and I I I think that as far as presidential influence goes, we have more access now because of the internet to really be all clear about the groups that we can't talk about that likely run everything at a worldwide level.
Mhm.
And I'm talking about government. It's not that hard to sort this out. It has to do with the money in your pocket. But the reality is that the groups that have come from our archaic pre-industrial revolution world money organization to where we are now with technology that I don't think it's governmental anymore. I do think it is global government. I do think that it is a responsibility, that there is a goal in mind, and I would be optimistic that this organization of higher, more advanced, uh, you know, colonizers and or people that live here that are likely us are communicating with either those leaders or individual leaders, including our presidents. In my impression of have any of them, you hear this, I'm going to find out about this, and then you hear a president go, no, I was just kidding, or there's nothing to say. And there's a reason they're doing that. And I think the greatest and most telling point that all of us keep talking about is, of course, John Kerry, the head of the Greek Orthodox Church, Buzz Aldrin. And I mean, it sounds like a joke. I mean, Buzz Aldrin, the highest ranking U.S. official outside of the presidency and vice presidency, and all of them go to Antarctica. All of them go. And it's just too odd. It's just, there's something going on as far as what they already know, what I think religious institutions that have been here for centuries stumbled across, either hid or hoarded or planted a church on top of, or then you have modern governments and technology where they're like, well, we're in on the game now. And at some point, I think the oldest religious institutions had to say, okay, yeah, well, we've known about this for longer than you, but you guys are now more powerful than us. And so I think there is a collective appreciation or exchange, whether desired or not, to manage this narrative that if we were exposed to it, a lot of people would panic, a lot of people, or would be angry. I think that's the thing that doesn't get talked about enough is what are advanced humans supposed to say to us openly? Yeah, your great times 1,000 grandma closed the blast doors when the last cataclysm, and we were gonna let you in, but then oops, you survived, and then we tried to give you religion, and then you guys kind of burned each other out. That's Bill's fault. We're still holding Bill on that one. And then
let me ask you this real quick. In respect to certain groups having knowledge of, let's say, high technology, we can focus on that for a moment. I believe it was Truman who had mentioned publicly that he had certain knowledge of high technology. And what he had said in certain documents, allegedly, was that this technology was recovered from what you might call off-world species. Now, does that mean this particular species may have lived within the Earth or somewhere here in some form terrestrially? Of course, that's always a possibility. I mean, your first introduction to something like that, it's very easy to muddle the origin. Now, that being said, you said that you think that it might just be an advanced civilization of our own in some way, shape, or form. There must be a connection there. If it's not energetic, it should at least be within the physiology and the biology. My question to you is, with all this thought leading right back to, of course, pinpointed events in our history dealing with disclosure within small groups, do you think that the governments, and let me put it this way, the upfront government, that one that we know can see, touch, feel, and we know the names, the president is also part of that. Do you think that part of the government is as well informed as perhaps some of the backsides of the government that have the actual workings? Or do you think that the privatized businesses such as Bigelow have more information and knowledge in the way of this high technology?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think there's a clear demarc between, I think there's the WWF, like, who's your favorite wrestler? Is it The Rock? Is it, whoever it is, right? There's this group that people get upset. Are you blue? Are you red? Are you fascist? Are you, are you a Democrat? Are you, people fill in the blank, and you can literally lose yourself in general day-to-day politics, and some of it right down to the neighborhood you live in, to the stop sign. Do we have a stop sign or a yield at this sign? And there are civics that work and function and are good, and people need to participate in that process. And then it gets to a level where you're like, okay, who has the money? I mean, we almost have to end up on Not Alien / private channel to discuss the rest of this. Which I would love to do in detail with you, which we should just now schedule. But to touch it briefly, I would say that if you look at what your average representative's income is personally and lifetime retirement and healthcare, you would have to argue after years in a particular position that should be of sacrifice of civil duty that they end up multimillionaires. You need to, again, the average American income is around 50 grand, and that's being generous. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so the reality is we are talking about an organization up front. Everyone, that's the afternoon evening train. And here it goes for all those interested. It looks like it's just a lot of lumber going to probably a big box retailer. So that's our evening train, because I'm 25 feet off the train yard. Love it. Yeah, so back to it, as far as government what we see as governments at the legislative, congressional level. We are talking about an organization that I think many of them aren't even aware of it. There's a system that's been in place for infrastructure, for building roads, for building large commercial public projects that require billions and trillions of dollars that move. They're all necessary activities, but I think the people at that level are concerned about those things. And then you get to the presidential level and you're like, okay, look, this the one thing I'm going to do is figure out this thing about aliens and UFOs. And every single president, and I believe it was Clinton that really, really got out there on it at one point, and then suddenly there was like nothing. And I think there's a reason for it. And there are many possibilities, and none of them are off the table. And one of them is, yeah, they're from somewhere else and they've always been here, or it's new people. That's a possibility, but it's very, very likely that a group of humans, and here's the worst part of it, we have such a hard time breaking up our history. What I mean by that is we get told that we were all in a loincloth and banging rocks, and then we're the most advanced we've ever been. Now there's all this engineered soil that I talk about, Terra prada. There's all these cymatic polygonal blocks all over the world, and that clearly indicates a worldwide global culture that clearly occupied the whole planet. There are weird genetic cuts in the human and plant and species of the planet that we are only just scratching the surface on, going, it really looks like we're engineered. But at the same time, it's easier to accept that it must be a foreign entity from another world, another universe, another dimension. Anybody who is human, and if they've been here the whole time, our assumption is they would help us. But then when you look at the kind of reasons why wouldn't they help us, here's the things that we have to start dialoguing more on. One is, did they really accidentally not see what was coming and end up in laser cut underground bunkers, and this time around they were not able to save as many people, and people on the surface just survived, where we get all of our, and we're not talking even younger Dryas over 11 to 13,000 years ago. We're talking super volcano / blow up 75,000 years ago. Are we talking about like Doggerland being here, and all the land that's underwater tells a truer story of the human race? So does it say it wasn't the people who knew the technologies, but the people who knew of the technologies? So they knew that they needed to get back to having rejuvenation chambers. They knew they had to get back to living indefinitely. But what if the groups didn't get along? I mean, we have sightings going back to Roman era, and there are sightings that Wallace Wagner just points out in Crossing the Crevasse. He talks about a Roman army that was about to have a fight, and a giant, not meteor, but a silver Mercury object lands between them and the opposing army, and they're like, the gods don't want us to fight. And that's like in 75 AD or BC. And then there's the fight over Nuremberg and Needs Be. That's a great picture.
Needs Be.
I like that. And so here are these examples of what is this? Is it a remnant advanced human race fighting actual extraterrestrials that came here and they ultimately didn't get along with our pre-existing advanced society? Or is it internal conflict where it's like, oh, you'd think that if they could live forever or live indefinitely or manage genes and high technology, that they would all get along in this global world society, but maybe they didn't. And then you have the conflict over Nuremberg / the Baltic Sea in the 1500s that approximately 1,000 people in Nuremberg witness, and they're watching an aerial combat battle. So are those internal ancient advanced humans fighting because we're assuming in that lineal history that I was starting with, that we were all in loincloths before the train came by, that the single society would survive a catastrophe, and that it was either leadership and a combination of the plebes that would get along. We're not thinking that survival group may have represented a very disjointed working class in a way where, or a combination where it was like, well, this side of the continent believes one thing and this side believes another. And in the end, this group has to repackage technology that they know of but they don't actually have access to because they were not the ones who originally created it, but they were of the society that did. So now they could have been fighting over that technology, and clearly they never were capable of going back to a worldwide global culture. And is that why they were fighting over the last 1,000 years that we've seen, that we have these witness accounts of these UFO interceptions? Is it because they have constantly been around us? And I like to point out that Atlantis, the legend of Atlantis, the story, does it like for a little bit of time, for a hot minute in the last couple of years, people are like, well, Atlantis represents a missing advanced culture that was really worldwide. We're just going to refer to it that way. But what if Atlantis really was a city and it was the last time? Because based on the dating from Solon, and based on what what he was told, the Greek Solon was told by the Egyptians. What if it was the last closest advanced city that regular survivor humans saw? What if it kept moving further away, and then finally they're like, look, we just have to retreat back underground, or we have to go underwater? The reality is we're not going to eliminate the tribal population, so we're peaceful enough to not do that. But then there's a group that already is modifying their bods to a point where they don't appear human, and they're already, they're like pulling off experiments, like you said. Are they pulling off experiments on us? So there's this big dialogue, and I'm throwing out all these little tidbits and pointers, not to resolve them right now, but I want to get them in everybody's head, that the best way for us to see why what this could possibly mean to us is to start tabling again all the facts in the ground, instead of just making up a very one directional story that it's an alien from somewhere else. Start really with the heart of the matter of very advanced technology that humans built in the ground. That
that's sorry, go ahead.
No, that's a good period.
No, that's absolutely a possibility. Now, you mentioned conflict a little bit, and this is something that people have been talking about, especially in the archaeological world, in respect to some of the findings that we have. Again, it's a proposed theory that human beings have had conflicts with extraterrestrials or terrestrial beings that obviously are much different from us in our past. I have a little trouble with this, though. And one of the reasons that I don't necessarily wholeheartedly subscribe to this as a possibility is because unless we had technology that paralleled whatever was attacking us, it would have been an easy one-sided battle for the extraterrestrials. Now, that is a possibility, especially when you talk about places like Atlantis, Lemuria, or even Sumeria, or Egypt. Any of these places that you want to pull out, there's a good chance that they had certain high technology, which again they may have resolved to in a different way than perhaps we are. But if that isn't the case, we would have always been painted as the weaker species, and I think even in our last 100 years, we're still painted as that weaker species. So to me, an actual conflict wherein an alien race or a differing race would actually have concern about losing seems very, very unfeasible to me.
Right. And that's why when we see technology, and I like I've given the Blinky Board analogy of banging on the Blinky Board, and people don't know for 1,000 years they're banging on the control panel of a 747, but they get a yellow, they get an orange light, they get a red light, and they're like, you do this ritual and you bang on it over here and you get an orange light, and you bang on it over there and you get a red light. And the level of skewed mindset over the high technology of human technology that you find in the ground. So basic evidences, starting with paleoanthropological evidence. From the minute we stopped digging in the ground in the mind you, there is good evidence that we've always been diggers. We've always readapted, whether it's the Greeks readapting polygonal construction and building and saying, well, who was here before you? And the Greeks even said the gods built this first. And then the Aztecs saying, well, the gods built this to the conquistadors. And then the same thing with the Egyptians. It's always the gods were there first. And you look again at the technology, always the highest level of construction at the lowest level. No one anywhere works like this. And this is getting to be a really old song. So what do we jump to? We jump to, what are the truths that we know? We know that when we stopped digging up in the 17 and 1800s, very early, so 16, 17, 1800s, the true history of archaeology is you find a Roman statue, Rome was well known because of the Bible, and through the Middle Ages, if you want to collect a Roman statue and throw it in your garden or on your mantle, cool. That's called, and then we call it art history. So if you get confused in college, that's called art history. I'm like, well, isn't it history? And then they're like, well, it's art history, and it's like, well, no, I think this is history, but then they call it art history, and the confusion is that they were not digging things up to know the truth of our past; they were digging them up for art. So paleoanthropological studies in the 1800s start taking themselves seriously, and what do they find? They start finding anatomically correct humans in layers of earth, which Michael Cremo revisits in Forbidden Archaeology, which is a great summary of, if you're not taught this in school, if you're going to school for archaeology or paleoanthropology or anything to do with fill in the blank, it's ancient or old and biological or otherwise, there's two things you got to ask yourself. If they're only teaching you what's in the books, it's on you to go out and look at old evidences. And that's what Cremo did for a decade. And these are actual recorded archaeological finds of anatomically correct humans going back millions of years. So, folks, you got to start with, well, what did we just do in the last 100? And then compare it against, well, there's a 1,200 ton stone in Baalbek, and there's a whole bunch of them. Oh, and they're at the Temple Mount, and they're in Siberia, and they're in South America, and we have a couple cranes on Earth. We keep pointing out, oh, we have 3 cranes that can lift this, and it can only lift it straight up and down. Well, we don't know how to cut it. We don't know how to lift it. We don't know how to move it, and more importantly, you can't put a piece of paper between it. The point is, they were doing it for not only earthquake control, but they're also doing it with tools and measurements and machines that are clearly not here anymore. So how old are these places? And the weathering from water and the erosion at some of these things that dynastically, whether in Egypt or South America or in Europe, are said, well, or Sardinia. I'm spending a lot more time on Sardinia and Malta with Jennifer Deo on my channel on Not Aliens, because of the mysteries of again, the very heart of this is technologies that do not line up with dynastic people. So they had to come before, and they include tools that are way beyond anything we have now. It's not a matter of having a really big saw. It's not, it's the matter of the complexity of the cuts, the complexity of the measurements, and all of it, along with, again, we have ancient cuts in the DNA that are written off as, oh, it's kind of mysterious. It looks like there's these cuts in the human genome that, well, they weren't done based on giving them birth down. They don't seem like they were done last 16,000 years. And yet there's cuts. And then around 50, 60,000 years ago, from what only they've tested, okay, it's not like they have, every university around the world doesn't have like a box of bones that says, well, we've gone around and we've collected everything. And from what we can tell right now, public record says around 50,000 years ago, Denisovan, Neanderthal, and a mystery 14% human that we still haven't identified, they all kind of bred together. So post-apocalyptic, possibly that Brad Olsen-ish slash everybody knows there's that volcano around 75,000 years ago. But this is exactly the catastrophe, if we're off on those years, that put that city in Cuba underwater 2,300 feet down and raised the recut structure where we think the Atlantis is up 7,800 feet. So you got Lake Titicaca at 12,006, almost 13,000 feet, that is salt water with seahorses. And then you have the recut structure 7,800 feet above ground, but yet it looks exactly like the measurements for Atlantis. And it has, again, a remnants of salt water as if they were bays, exactly for that. And then you have city near Cuba, 2,300 feet deep, and all of Doggerland has disappeared, and a number of other areas. So again, we have something that happens, and then a bunch of genetic mixing, but that's just based on today's evidence. So giant board game of archaeological clue and fun for everyone. Here we are with what clearly shows very advanced humans living alongside Neolith, Eolith wielding, rock baying, loincloth wearing tribes, just like now. But yet we have this technology that would require exactly the stuff we're all listing on: Wi-Fi, internet, computers, and really advanced cutting stuff that I'm I'm doing the Forbidden Knowledge News Conference this weekend, and I'm doing that live. You and I are going to be at, we're going to be at America's Stonehenge. I know we'll talk about it more later, but I'm giving a live lecture, and I'm going to include details within that live lecture, which everyone's welcome to come to New Hampshire for. We'll be there Saturday on May 1st. I will be giving a lecture for 3 hours, and it's going to include really the details of the machinery, right down to nanotechnology that we found. I mean, even in the 90s, we found nano spiral gold bits and parts that represent machining in Russia that was at a minimum. Again, you can't date gold itself, but where they found it in situ, in location without disruptive or intrusive burial, it was definitely where it was supposed to be. 22,000 to over 300,000 years old. And they said maybe even 500,000. And so the reality is that, one, we have the cycling of humanity and anatomically correct humans that blows away our, Darwinism says, we were all, monkeys, now what are you going to do with anatomically correct humans in the Red Crag and Table Mountain? So now we have to break the narrative, discuss the facts. And again, if we have millions of years of untold human history, except ding, 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 in the Hindu Vedas, it says the gods fought. Well, what if they weren't gods? What if it's just the last sliver of memory of advanced humans fighting? Yeah, right.
That's fantastic. It's a wonderful perception and interpretation. I think that is very grounded in terms of an explanation, and probably very possible with that in mind. What are your thoughts? I mean, when we talk about some of this, old world technology that was technically high technology, at least that's how we define it today. What is your thought on the Antikythera mechanism? I mean, this is something that people have been looking at for a long time. We know, at least to a point, that it's the world's oldest computer. What are your thoughts on this? And is there anything else that you've come across in your studies that might mirror some of technology from that period, or anything around, anything that was similar to that?
Yeah, what's great about the Antikythera is there's actually a very recent article that just came out in the last couple of weeks. They were able, through radiology, to even discern even more of the parts. I can't believe it's super exciting. They're declaring that they're about 96% there, down to every last word for the device. And I'll have to get you the link for everyone listening to check out. But right away in our dialogues, and what everyone here is, if you're into alternative, I know everyone's here because they're excited and interested in the same subject. So one of the things you have to start, I think it was important for me in doing my research. I'm only suggesting what worked for me. It doesn't mean it has to work for you. It's just that, start with world's first computer. We say it by accident. World's oldest computer. No, we didn't know they had computers. The actual quote from the scientists that found it originally said, had we not found it, we would have believed it. I quoted in the book, actually. I talk about it in the book. We wouldn't have believed they could do it. So you've gone from they couldn't do it at all to this is the world's first computer. How about it's the only one you found because it was a rusty bucket at the bottom of a salty ocean?
Let me stop you for just a moment here, because I want to comment on something that you're saying at large. It seems to me the scientific community and other communities of study and research, we know that they're rigid. We know that already. Yeah. Okay. But it seems like there might be an element of perhaps going out of one's way to dismiss something, or to say this is still unfounded and just leave it as such and not return, because it compromises so much information that came before. Are you seeing the same sort of trend, wherein it's not just compromising whatever it is at hand, it's compromising the entire package?
Yeah, it's a super important. It's like there's multiple EKG readings going on, and one of them that should never, it's like a symphony of stupidity, unfortunately, or cowardice, or we're in our safe zone. We just charged $250,000 for this guy to be able to recite that this Australopithecus, which is likely monkey bones, because we did it based on morphology. We didn't do any actual DNA testing, but it sure looks like a monkey bone. But we're going to call it Australopithecus, and it's not a baboon, even though it looks like it probably is. But we taught you this, and you spent $250,000, and you better say and continue to scratch my back and your back, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
write collegiate papers, and we're not going to change the paradigm, because I'm, despite all technology on Earth changing sometimes on a 6-month basis for the cell phone you have, we're going to hold on, like Methuselah, to the theory of evolution. And it's one thing to respect. It is not an equal balance, yin and yang, between, well, we've come up with this many advances, but grounding us is our original theory. No, it's insane. The original theory is now bobby pins on a clothes hanger that you wheel out your dirty clothes after you bang them out on rocks. That's your starting point. The Darwinism 140-year-old, just this model that has not moved archaically from guys that didn't want women to vote. And then yet at the other end, you guys are doing nanoarchaeology already, pulling out sediments in Doggerland. They're actually doing this. You can read news stories on this, including Ancient Origins, and they're actually sifting through saltwater sediments to determine Doggerland, which is the entire land from Ireland and Scotland all the way to France, was above water, and a massive amount of land. They're determining botanical gardens and the layout of the fauna and species that are anywhere from 6 to 15 to plus thousand years old, and they're sorting out the fauna that was there before the island sunk, or the land sunk, which made England and Scotland and everything an island. And this is where we are now, and at our baseline in the middle, it is not a safe middle ground to say that we were all one devolved away to where we are now. Shouldn't be part of the paradigm. So there is, on one hand, academic hubris. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to look stupid. Institutionally, we're a multi-billion-dollar collegiate institution, and we're the smartest.
There are real implications that come with that, and consequences. If you mess up enough and you lose your credibility, you lose your funding. And guess what? If you lose your funding,
right?
That's pretty much it.
And again, people are fickle, and I understand the fear. Here's where I'm at with this. Imagine I got super into Vegas for a long time, and I learned everything about Vegas, and they would not teach people how to gamble because they thought if the more people knew how to gamble, they'll cheat. But then they started holding classes. Lo and behold, when people didn't feel stupid that they could walk up to a roulette and know what the hell was going on, people were willing to risk money because they understood how to play. Mm-hmm. Vegas started making more money because they were teaching people to not only to know how to play, but people didn't feel stupid, and they weren't afraid of the game. So they're playing roulette, and they're playing craps, games that when you walk up, if you already don't know how to play, they just didn't want to play. And I think that the same analogy could be applied to institutions now. So this is a shout out. One, I've always said archaeologists need to be paid to not find what's not only within the paradigm, they need to go to bedrock, and they need to be paid to lose. They need to be paid to not find anything. They need the ability to go to once a site is approved, they need to not, if they don't find something, they need to not be defunded. They need to keep being funded and supported, because if you believe taking $250,000 of their money is worth it, then they're worth backing. You don't take someone's money from the institution that you say you are all about higher learning, and then say they're not worth backing during what is the most, not historically important, but the most important thing amongst us is to reactivate our pineal glands, reactivate our full consciousness, reactivate these higher planes that we know, like synesthesia. Oh, it seems like these crazy abilities where all 5 senses work together. That's a coincidence. No, it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence.
No.
But if you were the university that would turn around and say, well, we found 1 million items within our storage, and it turns out that we have 5 schist discs, and we have what looks like a number of items that are out of place, out of time artifacts, and we're the academic institution that has now tabled 100,000 facts that nobody knew a year ago. We can't even keep up. Our archaeological program is open. Imagine getting applications and having buildings built and research done. And instead of spending 100 years, 99 years is what they spent, for all the people who go to Teotihuacan, where it looks like kind of a computer grid circuitry, and it's a very famous site in Mexico that everybody goes to, that if you look at the original plate photography from the 1860s, 70s. It's a bunch of dirt mounds. It took them 99 years to just get it where it is now. And they're not even close to opening up the rest of the city or anything else. Imagine having archaeological teams that could manage the trees that have grown on them and any minerals or anything that was sucked up within the biology of the tree. And people are testing those. And then the soil could be sorted. Imagine having archaeological teams of not 20, 30, but 1,000 students that don't live at the universities but live on sites. Their entire academic, it's not just a season of field research. They spend 6 or 8, or like a doctor. It wouldn't be hilarious if nanoarchaeology to archaeoacoustics and archaeoastronomy, that the entire field morphs into people really academically living for their entire collegiate career in the field at these sites. I mean,
you're nearly describing a utopia in terms of this research. That's a utopia to me.
And who wouldn't pay for that?
Right.
And that's my shout out to institutions that are worried that I'm saying, Harvard is stupid, or, MIT is smart but stupid. Like you might be able to program an algorithm about how cars run on the road, but you don't know how to find your car, so you're stupid. And, when you leave it in the parking lot after 20 minutes, you can ask for it in 20 languages, and you can write about it in haikus, but you guys, practically speaking, have no idea what to do with the actual, so and yes, there's a conspiracy out there for everyone that's excited about, between religious institutions, which we've already named, and others, and governments and academic institutions, they're all married together, and they're trying to avoid all of us sorting this out because, the truth is we didn't tell you the truth. And so what does that look like? Part of it is, what does an advanced human come out and say? Like, not only did we not open the doors for you, or, when we came out, it had been so long, or we have the technology right now to end cancer. Look, we did that once in this 40,000 year ago window. You guys killed the shit out of each other, and we don't want to give that back to you. Or, we could end XYZ misery, or it's our fault that XYZ misery is still happening. And actually it's our fault that the whole planet ended up where it is. And then we had, subsequent conflict. And the reality is that in any capacity where they come out and tell us our missing history and our genetic memories wake up on it, and, or we know we have amnesia, but it might not just be heartache and loss of family and friends and loved ones. It might be that we are where we are because that collective human consciousness needs to reach a certain level before abilities are reactivated, as in the total collective human consciousness, as in you can't just eliminate people because you think they're worthless because they live in a jungle or live in in the Arctic. That
prejudice.
That every human life is actually valuable, not just in a woo-woo way because you shouldn't kill humans. But the reality is that, again, it's so disheartening to see something like the Georgia Stones, where they say, in the future, you better make sure there's only half a billion people on the planet. It's like, who gave you the right to decide that? Who on earth? How do you even? Where is the manual that said we need 58 million bison, we need 32 million mammoths, and we need 8 trillion mosquitoes, and then the earth will be perfect again? What gives you? Yeah, who the hell gave you the manual? We're still discovering 3,500 to 5,000 species a year, and you idiot out there think that, again, Leonardo da Vinci came up with a corkscrew wood metal thing that might not fly, and it didn't. But we have people now building on research on one hand that are coming up with nanographene switchers and spintronics and quantum computing and crazy new medical things. But is it because we've just built up a new knowledge base, or is it also those downloads and that collective human consciousness that is involved?
That's a great question. And let me just stop you here for just a moment, because I think you bring up a great point, okay, wherein there are certainly groups of people and even individuals who certainly don't hold each other in any sort of high regard. And, let's look at a species. I'm sorry, not a species. Let's talk about a culture that is being treated like a species, perhaps an indigenous culture that hasn't had much contact and is being protected by the country or state that they live in, wherein, commoners are usually not welcome to go in there for many various reasons. but they'll put out statistics and they'll talk about the deforestation or the destruction of the environment as a whole and how it's affecting some of these localized tribes. And they talk about this in the way of extinction, the way that we would talk about species. So it's interesting that we have compartmentalized in our minds to some degree, collectively, I think, maybe some subscribe more than others, that there are subcultures, and perhaps the prejudice that we put on that really deems the worthiness in how we see and view some of these cultures. I mean, we could take that for many steps, to be honest with you. But I'd like to hear your comments on that, and then we can move right into the Philadelphia experiment stuff while we still have time, because that'll be fun. We're talking about technology, and guess what? That's at the foundation. So
I think that one of the analogies that so people are concerned, there's no reason for a number of reasons that we can't discuss on this channel why we couldn't feed and take care of every human on the planet. There's literally enough food. That's not the issue. The other thing is, again, we tend to relate to things to the history we know. So we look at everyone on the planet and we think, okay, well, remember, we used to be banging rocks. No. We used to be very advanced. There is ancient, advanced engineered soil called Terra prada on every continent. And this soil represents a society that we have no knowledge of, but yet it's everywhere that we didn't think we were.
Terra prada?
Terra prada, yeah. So Terra prada.
Terra prada. Where did that word come from, if you know?
It's just Portuguese for black earth, basically, or black soil. And then there are other versions of it, like Chernozems in Europe. There's a black market in Ukraine for another engineered soil, ancient, and it's not just there though. Chernozems are in Canada, they're in the United States, they're all over. And so and the other thing is we have all these deserts, and a lot of them look very, very suspicious. Like, why are they where they are? It's because of the jet stream and the earth has changed. Well, but North Africa, now they're saying that North Africa, based on remnant river elements, that even North Africa and the Egyptian period at 6,000 or 8,000 BC was definitely tropical and was definitely populated with plants and species. So when we get back to that nano sedimentary archaeology, where they're like what they're doing underwater off the coast of France, and they're figuring out, oh yeah, Doggerland used to have these flora and fauna. And well, how hard is it going to be for us to start plugging locations that are just nothing but floating sand dunes, and we get down to a layer a lot like ice core drill outs in Greenland or in Antarctica or the Arctic, where we say, okay, well, this layer melted snow is from XYZ BC or XY million years ago. I think we can get through layers of sand and eventually say, hey, it looks like we have a granular element that says Terra prada, or some engineered soil was also here and here. And when we look at the map, like all the Göbekli Tepes, what we have again is a global society that wasn't just using the soil for growing food. It could, again, filter heavy metals, filter carbon dioxide, and has piezoelectric properties. Well, if you have giant megalithic buildings and everything was connected, and you were using earth grid networks and antenna like the Nazca lines or the Jordan Nazca lines or the Bolivian Nazca lines or all the other weird very circuitry looking lines that seem to also have arsenic and qualities of piezoelectric qualities. You mix all of that all around the world, global society, and currently we have 8 billion people, and back to not feeding them, 8 billion people would fit if you give them all an acre in about 2 Texases. 8 billion people with an acre each could fit in about 2.5 Texases with maybe roads. Okay. Now we can argue about, now if you want to shorten that up, it was suggested to me, put them in multi-towers, and now you put them in even a smaller space. The entire world population could leave this planet empty. And we assume it's overpopulated. My argument is that it's still underpopulated, that the collective human consciousness required to put this back on a global Gaia of terraformed and engineered and renewed rejuvenance in not in safe mode where we are now and not really conscious, actually is going to require continued expansion of the total human population with also better conditions than we're in currently. I mean, we literally have people not just living like tens of thousands of years ago. Unfortunately, we have a number of people living in the Middle Ages.
And just to let everyone know, just to interrupt very quickly, to let everyone know, I put the Terra Prada Wikipedia in the description, or if it didn't go already, I will have it there at the end of the show, just so you can look into this a little bit further, because this engineered soil is very interesting to look into. So
yeah, it's not sexy, for everyone out there. Again, I've talked about this a lot. It's not sexy. It's not mummies. It's not golden statues. If you have soil that is intentional first off, when I went paleo a number of years ago, I'm like, okay, how do I grow really nutritious food? I had learned that not every plant, they rotate crops, but there's only about 17 nutrients. And then I find out that, there's like 56. Wait, no, there's 80. Oh, wait, there's Dr. Joe Wallach and the 90 for Life vitamin. And I'm like, wait, how many nutrients can be in a plant? Well, how many am I getting? And it's like, what? All these tomatoes are grown in Florida and sand. And I'm like, okay, well, what's the most nutritious way? Before I learned about aeroponics and you could control liquid nutrients, like, well, what do I do? And then I had heard about this black market for this highly nutritious soil that was getting snuck out of Brazil and snuck out of Ukraine. And it was basically saying, yeah, this is the most nutritious. Oh, and by the way, there's a professor in Kansas that's been looking at it. Did I mention it self-replicates and seems to repair and manage itself? Does that. And yet not sexy, right? Not sexy, but it's ancient, and there's various cultures that this is not slash and burn. Modern versions of this are called biochars. So for people out there who are interested, you'll learn soil scientists can't replicate Terra Preta, but they created biochars. So if you're going to have an apple orchard, it's exactly what it sounds like. You take biological elements like a compost, but it's more complex. It has this kind of wood in it, or these kind of
it's an alchemy.
Yes, it's exactly an alchemy. And then it might be better for wheat, it might be better for corn, it might be better for growing apples and apple trees. And so we have modern biochars, they're just not Terra Preta, and they're not even close, and they still haven't sorted it out. And so then you got this professor at Kansas University studying. Well, it also, and if you start looking up the actual scientific papers on Terra Preta, the thing is, think again, standard academia coming full circle. They say, oh, it has all these material. Isn't this interesting? That has all these qualities. It's such a mystery. Well, we'll keep looking into it. And that's as far as they'll go with it, because you can't say what it is up front, but it points to a very advanced human race, and it points to a global society. And then you add on polygonal construction with earthquake canceling capabilities and giant stone spheres that also are not just giant, but down to golf ball size. And again, they seem to be wave resonators. And then there's new papers out on that. I talk about the papers in my book, but you can go look all this up, and you start to see a very advanced human race that is very much aware of collective human consciousness, very much using it, has abilities like synesthesia, programming and tweaking that they're doing within the human body, for everyone to say, well, when did we start, or where did we come from? Guess what? We don't get to answer that question right now. But what we could do is encourage these institutions, instead of saying, hey, you guys are all idiots, or, you guys have got it wrong for 100 years. It's like, okay, you guys are the only people with the equipment. It's okay that you were wrong. But now you could have almost 100% college enrollments. You could have, and it wouldn't be, college would be more corporate in this. I know that sounds weird. It would be more interesting, exciting, and you want to see true freak economics, set out at the Guatemalan LiDAR scans to uncover a square mile per month of ruins. Set out to get to the bedrock, instead of the Clovis first is a joke, and the Clovis is the mystery label put on the everyone came down from a land bridge. I mean, they're finally over it.
Let me ask you real quick here, as you're on this part of the subject. We know that America's Stonehenge in New Hampshire, it largely is unexcavated. Okay, we're talking acres upon acres upon acres. Just a sliver is already been looked at.
An acre and a half out of 110.
Thank you for the exact measurement. I mean, it's incredible. How many sites would you say, at least in that area, because I won't make it something global unless you know the answer, how many sites do we have knowledge of that are excavated in the same way, where there's just not much taken up yet, but we do know that the ground span a considerable amount of distance?
America's Stonehenge is a great example because you have megalithic parts, large megalithic blocks mixed in with what looks like river rock. You have multiple cultures occupying it with carbon evidence of them at least being there to 8 to 9,000 years and possibly longer and likely longer. And there are 800 known sites that are approximately in the same personality as America's Stonehenge in New Hampshire. There are
crazy.
between that area, and Canada, just in that area, 800 sites that are similar to America's Stonehenge. And these are not colonial first arrival from the new to the new world. This is not colonial work in the last 300 or 400 years. This is way prior. And it's not just, it's indigenous people. They may have occupied it and they certainly may have used it. But again, it's another mysterious construction method. You have 70 years of active work that Dennis Stone has done. 70 years. Well, his family. It's his grandfather that bought that site, and active archaeological work has been going on for over 70 years. And I'm hoping that more can be done and that we're going to be looking at it. But it's a great example of just one style of architecture, if you want to call it that.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting you but you keep saying things I'd like to ask you about. What's keeping us from excavating a site like America's Stonehenge further? Is it monetary issues? Is it permission for the land? What is it exactly?
No, Dennis, the best thing about it is that they are private stewards, and I feel like more things can get done with private stewards than, of course, with government. There are lots of places that are government controlled or institutionally controlled, and I mean collegiately and within the field of the religion of archaeology. The current I like what Carl Lehrberger says, the archeo priests. It's more of a religion than it is actual academic. It's a joke, but they won't allow on a lot of these government controls. Yeah, Mr. D.B. Cooper.
Mr. D.B. Cooper in the house. Yeah. Thank you, brother.
Yeah. So you are welcome, and big salute back at you. So I think that the actual site for what they've done is tremendous. The amount of work that Dennis has and his family to maintain the site, just to make it accessible. They've done So here's something, and I'm sure he's talked about it in other interviews, so I don't think I'm giving anything away. But they have been clearing scrub trees. And I'm all about keeping trees. Let me tell you, I'm all about keeping trees. However, here's a crazy example. There have been a lot of serious NERA. There's an association in New England that was founded by his family that has been actively participating in archaeological work with state archaeologists and archaeologists all around and that area and more. And the reality is that money and people, you go do any landscaping. If anyone out there has ever landscaped in their own yard, that's archaeology. That's how tedious and rough and hard it is to lift dirt and rock. And then you have to be careful with the dirt and rock and you have to sift through it in a particular order. It's not like you can just stab at it and go like they did when archaeology started. I almost wish I could just take TNT into the Great Pyramid and blow stuff up like they used to. It's like, we can't dig, but we can blow shit up. Let's do that. But here's the site where they're actively digging. They find things and they've been working at it. But just to clear trees, here's what I was going to tell you. So active archaeological work for 70 plus years. They cleared a bunch of trees, and Dennis sent me a text because we communicate privately, and he says everyone's been walking by a serpentine. There's a whole history of a serpentine culture all over in these ruins, like the Serpentine Mound in Ohio. Possibly the same culture, could go back way into the thousands BC. Well, everyone had been walking around a serpentine wall and no one noticed it because it was hidden in brush and trees. And they just cleared that and found a serpentine shaped wall. That just happened a few weeks ago. And so
I saw that.
Yeah. And so you and I going there and conflict coming and us all of us going to be there. And when I'm speaking, I am speaking overall on this subject that we're on. but it's in more detail with better pictures that I've never put out anywhere before. And it's going to be really fun to have a 3-hour actual start to finish lecture, then do question and answers. Then we are as a group going to go walk the site. And not only that, but in winter, Dennis lets people snowshoe and you see the greater
cool.
site. So are people welcome to help, to volunteer their arms and bodies to dig? Yeah. But then the other part is, what can get funded, and moving masses of amounts of dirt and doing it in an order. And honestly, I think if you're going to call yourself a smart institution, and again, these are the throwdowns, but larger institutions have to get over their bruised egos and realize that they're not very good at doing what they do, that spending 30 years, putting a vase together at the Disneyland ticket counter is not the same thing as excavating Disneyland. And that's where we're at. And to think that there's just 800 something plus sites at various levels of archaeological work just on the New England area, like America's Stonehenge, not all of them with known celestial calendars like at America's Stonehenge, but various complex sites that just date to that era, and all eras of human history are important. So it's going to be exciting and fun.
Well, now you're mentioning that this is May 1st. You're doing this lecture. Okay, very quickly, because I'd like to. It's a Saturday, which is perfect. I can't say nobody's working. I'm always working. But that being said, I'd like to ask you this question very quickly, and then we'll move into the topic of the Philadelphia experiment, so I don't have to change the title of the show. No, I'm kidding.
You heard Michael first. It's about the title.
I love the subject, and I know that we won't be able to cover everything.
You just gave the exact justification for degrees. We can't change the degree. Learn evolution. You just gave it. This is it in situ working right here. It's like we're staying on topic, even if it's the wrong one.
You and I talk, and we can just go and go and go, and that's fantastic, and that's one of the things I really cherish about our friendship, and that's really cool. So you're doing this on May 1st. You're doing this on May 1st. It's going to be in New Hampshire. Yep. Very quickly, if I was interested in attending this, are there tickets available, and how would I get them? And what else is included in this day of lecture and education? Because I know there's a couple different things that you have going on here. But again, very quickly, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. So for everyone out there listening, feel free to please email and give your opinions, and or just buy a ticket at nonaliens.com. They're $29.95. The online system steals money from us before we even get the money. They take their cut. But the money is there. What you get is a 3-hour, really intense lecture period. We will take a break, but I will be going at it for 3 hours in a way that I've never done. It will be available virtually. So what you get is also virtual access, which means if you cannot come to New Hampshire, you can, of course, watch this event online. Follow up to that is, of course, there'll be a break for food. But then we will be meeting at America's Stonehenge. Dennis's site is absolutely run entirely on the tickets. Those are $8 to $12-ish plus dollars to go to America's Stonehenge. However, while we're there, Michael here hasn't volunteered yet, but I will be walking with the tour guides, and I will not be there to talk over the tour guides on America's Stonehenge. But the chance is to spend the rest of the afternoon with me and Michael and other Michael from Conflict. We will be there to enjoy your actual presence, answer and ask questions together, and be together the rest of the afternoon. Really, you're buying a whole day deal. For those virtually online, we are recording. Well, Dark Hour, we're recording a show. Conflict and I are recording a show. And of course, Jennifer Deo, the archaeologist, and I, we're doing work archaeologically with Dennis. So the site, we have site planning to do. So actually part of this live walk isn't just to go, oh, look, hey, a neat site. Part of you guys actually being there with us, with me in this particular case, is I'm not going to be specifically talking about exactly what we're doing, but we will be doing, I will publicly point out, well, we are planning archaeological work on the site that Jennifer Deo and I are planning to do this season. And there are other archaeological teams and people doing, what it's a huge site. It's like, okay, it's not Giza, but the Giza's hundreds of, it's not like just the three pyramids. It's a very large area. There's many cities on the Giza plateau. It's more like a province or a state. And so there are lots of activity. There's lots of planned or in planning or been planned and executed archaeological events, but digs, and we're going to be working on our own tell at some point this season. And so part of that is to walk the site. I have no problem walking publicly with everyone. And part of it is going to be, what am I seeing? What are we looking at? What are we going to be doing? So some of that's going to be part of the conversation. All of it will be quite a bit of it. This part will be recorded. So for those of you virtually tuning in, you might not get that part live, but you will have first access to it on my site. If you buy a ticket, I do not have this in the ticket. If you buy tickets, you will also get 6-month membership on Not Aliens. So and that's strictly now. I've not offered that, but to anybody. That's just now live Dark Hour. So if you buy a ticket, I will immediately set you up with a login, and I have my own interviews and things that we can't talk about because there are people who will ban us. I have all sorts of stuff like that, lots of interviews. My audio book is on that site. And then of course I have lots of in-person photos in Egypt and my trip to South Africa, the color photos to my book. There's a bunch of stuff on the site. It's totally worth it. But the ticket will include all the above.
That's fantastic. And will your book be available to purchase on site?
Yeah, so that's the other part of the lecture. I guess I didn't bring that up. Of course, we're going to stand around and do a meet and greet, and I will have books available if you want to buy one, and I'll sign them on site. Yeah, that'll be there also. That'll be fun.
Sounds awesome to me. And of course, as Jared has mentioned, I will be there along with Conflict Radio and several others that you may or may not know, but we'll get to know if you decide to come out and join us. It's going to be a fantastic time, and it will be very educational. And of course, in many respects, hands-on, if not just with the questions, but with the site itself. And I think it's going to be a great time. So I hope to see most of you guys out there if you can make it, if you're in the area. As I understand, those of you in Australia may have trouble getting over here for the 1st of May. But that being said, as Jared mentioned, it will be broadcast as well. There will be a virtual lecture that he's putting together, and we will be premiering these on all the channels involved. And so you can get many different perspectives of the entire event. Yeah, essentially. All right, so let's do this. Okay, I see we got about 20 minutes left.
Oh, we got Philadelphia. Let's get Philadelphia Experiment.
Do you want to jump on this? I mean, we may end up continuing this.
What are our decision trees? We got Choose Your Own Adventure book here. Which is it?
Well, let's do this. I'll save and regrettably change the title. No, I'm just kidding. I'll save the Philadelphia Experiment because there is, again, guys, this is like diving into MK Ultra or the Montauk Project, something like that. There's so much backstory and so many individuals involved. I don't want to sell it short. In one of the first formal times that I think we talk about it on the show, we've mentioned Montauk many times, and for those of you who have been following, the reason for that. But the Philadelphia Experiment is very intimately tied in with that. Let's save that one for a moment. Let's do this, okay? The last time we spoke, you had mentioned, and I think we discussed a little bit about walk-ins or universal downloads. Now, the term walk-in, I'm familiar with it first and foremost through Dranvala Melchizedek, who would claim to have a walk-in, which essentially is what we call a universal download today. Now, interestingly enough, when you talk to certain people, they will tell you that they walk through their daily life and are consistently receiving these downloads in some way, shape, or form. Now, the skeptic in me wonders how that's exactly working, of course, but also the effect and the result on somebody's life to continually be receiving what they're considering esoteric knowledge, or something that's a little bit less in our reach in terms of experiences and so forth. So with the walk-in phenomenon, where do you stand on that? I'm sure you've heard of this before. And why do you think that a bulk of information would be given to us like that in, again, what you might call a download, rather than what we're traditionally used to working with in respect to the trickling of information and knowledge and wisdom that come from experience? Why would we be given all of this all at once in these bulk shifts, if you will?
It's really interesting. There's, Edgar Casey, there's
Mm-hmm.
So many of these you can't argue. We were just having this conversation. We recorded an interview last night with the guy who does the Creepy Little Book YouTube channel, and
Okay.
we were talking about exactly we were talking about some alien wars and stuff, and it's like, wait, what's the source material for this? And sometimes I can't, in all the years of research, go down every rabbit hole. There is an incredible amount of
course.
information. I
Of
could say
course.
like 4 words right now, we can all get banned like from 6 different subjects. And so here we are with this particular knowledge was about something that the answer was, well, it was a download. And it's like, again, it was I grew up Irish Catholic. Well, it was Holy Spirit inspired. Well,
okay. Interesting correlation. Yeah.
You can't argue with that. You can't argue if you want to believe science. That's not science. If you want to believe information, that's not historical fact. There's no provenance of the information. It's just your thoughts on it. Now, here's the problem. For some people, it's described as paranormal. For some people, like in this download state, again, is there collective human consciousness? On the very elementary beginnings of serious, super cool, publishable, like I got super into it when I was 17, In Search of Schrodinger's Cat. There's one book,
Mm-hmm.
Schrodinger's Cat, getting into quantum philosophy and what does it mean? If the tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? If the cat's in the box with the poison, is it dead or is it not? What is the duality of universes and blah, blah, blah. And so all of it together, here we have this collective human consciousness. Is our field of information also around us, like in that Carillion photography that's showing the magnetic field that doesn't just indicate our health in the background? Yes, Area 503.
Area 503 with the $5.03 super chat. I see it twice. I don't know if that's a mistake. If it is, I'll be gladly refund that.
503.
503. Well, there's actually 2 super chats, one almost right after the other, and I don't know if he meant to do that, so I'll talk to him after the show. But thank you very much, brother, for that super chat, and of course, all of you super chatting tonight. Yeah. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you.
And I think this is just a fun, because all of this, everyone listening, this is our history. That is also our future. It's also a reawakening of our own, this, again, like Graham Hancock says, a species with amnesia. And so here you have these downloads, and here's where I get suspicious, like you said, skeptically speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to acknowledge that people experience our ancient high-tech past differently. Some people might say, I had a spiritual experience, I had a paranormal experience. And it's not separate subjects. And I think that it's much more fair if the people who are experts in paranormal and experts in certain in esoteric spiritual states, these people have been actually tested in scientific settings about what's going on when a healer prays over food, over seeds. I mean, these are all well-tested experiments that have shown that there is a magnetic aurora shift, whether it's a seed, an egg, a plant, food. There is something that is actually being tapped into. But when we experience it and we don't have a huge knowledge base for the subject, it becomes, oh, what was this mystical thing? Or if it was this spiritual thing, or if it was this, super sticker.
Thank you, Misty. OC Dragons.
Yes, I like purple dragons. There's nothing in little mushrooms. Yeah.
Puff the magic dragon.
Yeah, there's no innuendos in this at all. Strictly innocent dragons that hang out and do dragon stuff. Imagine the size of pot in the Jurassic period. Can you ever think about that? Can you think about a Jurassic fire? I mean, how high could you get a dinosaur that's like 8 stories tall? What is that?
Oh my God.
What happens when Brontosaurus gets the munchies after like the sequoias burn and the mega pot floor? Like what's the biggest ancient pot plant ever found? About that.
Of course, they're all land races, I'm sure,
Yeah, but what happens when blowing in the breeze is it looks like one of those giant American flags over those breakfast places, but it's really just a pot leaf, and then forest fire, and then just
I guarantee you're getting a few people pretty jolly there in the chat. I'm sure a couple stoners out there.
Yeah. Think about the reality of giant wild pot fauna from the Jurassic period, the size of buildings burning in a forest fire. Again, and on the edge of course, a very comfortably numb group of brontosauruses. who are
You paint a vivid picture.
calmly, super calmly and chilly exiting that forest fire because it's burning just slow and smoky enough that they're kind of lingering back.
Azure Sky, thank you very much for the $4.99 on the super chat. Yes, I do have PayPal. It is in the description if you choose to go that route. Anybody who's interested. Jurassic Sativa sounds amazing. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I'm sure it would be really nice and bright green. Maybe a little fruity and piney in there. I mean, I don't really know the sense of the Jurassic era, but
think about the soil. I mean, think about the nutrient contents. I mean, who knows what the natural THC level was? And if you
undoubtedly it was pure, I'm sure.
if you were even 20% more conscious than you are now, how high and where would you be on that note?
I'd be riding on back of the Brontosaurus. You wouldn't mind.
Yes, or at least spiritually speaking, the Brontosaurus might be riding on you.
Now that's an image right there. Maybe a baby one. What was it? Littlefoot from Land Before Time. Yeah, he can hang out on my back. I might be able to support that. I'm not that strong.
Puff the magic DarkHour Paranormal flies through the sky.
Album will be out soon, guys. Please hang out front, and we'll be handing out demos at the end of the show.
Otherwise, that's and I have the same problem because I do everything through notaliens.com for the like you said, PayPal's a better route to go for the the cuts there and everything, like you said. But the idea of the download, here's where it always gets suspicious. I joke about this, but folks, when you hear people giving you the plot of Stargate, Deep Space Nine, or Babylon 5, or you're probably hearing an episode of that. It's super exciting and fun to compare. What they do in movies is something to help get information out, and that's I think there's an entertainment business in Jules Verne and Isaac Asimov for a reason, and deep thinkers, even if they're doing fiction, are doing, they do both. Like Dave Brody, just came out with Romerica. It's historical fiction, but the theory is the Romans were in America. He isn't very far from America's Stonehenge. I've interviewed him a couple times now, and that's his 14th book, but he keeps all the lists of facts in the back for you to reference and go, holy crap, the Romans could have actually come to America. And that might explain all the coins and all these other artifacts. And so when somebody says they get a download and it's super spiritual, and it's about when they start talking alien wars and stuff, again, now you're into a belief system. You're not into if you have a hunch, trust your own instincts. If you have a meter inside you going, that just isn't ringing remotely in my wildest dreams as a fact, you might be more accurate because you're still connected to that same cloud. You're still connected to that same collective consciousness, and
no matter what you do.
So if you hear this incredibly complex story that literally has no way of backing that up, okay, we'll take it into account, but how does it really affect you? How is that pointing us towards, again, when you relate it to the information of what we're finding, we are so far away from the Titanic and seances of the Houdini period of the 1900s. We are so much closer now to the superhuman abilities of Wim Hof and the superhuman capability of Stig Severinsen. And here we are. And there's so many others, even in the movement culture. I like to bring up Ido Portal and Erwin LaCour, MoveNet. I mean, that what we're rediscovering about our physiology and positive gene expression in the paleo world, like the Rob Wolfs, Mark Sissons, the people, they're tabling information that we used to go, oh yeah, you can't do. Oh wait, it turns out you can affect your thyroid directly. You can manage your mitochondrial DNA for positive gene expression. It really isn't just a term, garbage in, garbage out, good in, good out. I mean, there's actual science behind it. And here we are in a time frame where somebody says they get a huge download of info. Okay, here's the other distinction. Now it's not, we're going to move from spiritual and paranormal to, what if in the collective consciousness, you're at a point in your positive gene expression, in your workout, your exercise, your physiology, your mindset, your meditation, you're at a point where your download is true as hell, but it's not that it's a download, it's a reactivated personal, it's like you're carrying, think of it as zip files on a computer. Collective consciousness is holding a zip file of maybe every consciousness. that it's not a genetic memory from your personal experience or your great great grandma's. Oh, better pass this down in the form of a genetic memory, and you activate it currently in our sleep mode in our 10 to 50% consciousness as a instinct.
Mhm.
But instead of saying, "Oh, I used to be Mark Antony," I like to bring that one up, or Cleopatra. You're always somebody famous in a past life. That it was your life. What if, in the
Mhm.
collective files of the collective human consciousness, you have downloaded someone else's experience or memory or a thought, and or again and again, if you have really complex names and it has to do with salamanders and warring, feuding bug people, I mean, great, but what if it does have to do with a location and or the schist disk, and not just something you're conscious of, but maybe it makes no sense to you? I think no one should be made fun of, and everyone who has these downloads, I do think that we need a collective new organization, a collective new alternative, almost ironic university, a place where this information can be stored, because there's a possibility that every download that is actually real. And here's the deal. It's not like download begins, download ends. And even if somebody says, I'm pretty sure it got, like, I was shocked into it here and it ended here, and for
Right.
sure I can tell you, even if all that's true, and most of the story is ridiculous, again, because of their own, like, the way they and their set of consciousness experience the download, we can't ignore downloads. What we can do is catalog them and look for, again, was it like in a religion, is it the gods were warring, or was it really like a bunch of people could not explain why there's aerial combat going on in highly advanced anti-gravity ships? But is it a case of, in that download, was there machinery? Was it like a synesthesia ability that we know
Mm.
those exist,
Mhm.
crossing all the senses? Is within the story a location that overlaps with 20 other downloads? I think it's important that we collect them and look at them, but in the idea, um, oh, Valerian the Mac, yeah.
We'll get on that one for just a moment, because we got about 4 or 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure Jared can tell everybody where to find him.
Yeah.
But very quickly, Jared, have you had
Yeah.
a UFO or UAP experience?
Yeah. So ironically, I don't bring it up as much, but
Thanks,
first time
Valerian.
I ever went to, for algorithms. Oops.
I didn't mean to do that. Whoops.
Okay. So, uh, yeah, Big Rock in California, not too far from Contact in the Desert. The last year that it was at the Joshua Tree Meditation Center, I spent 3 hours at night near Big Rock. They said it was always a big spot to see UFOs. So I saw the triangle UFOs, and not just one, like a bunch. Like, as long as you want to be
Mm.
there, it's impossible not to see them. And I have very limited experience flying. I had 6 hours in the air training. I know a little bit about actual airplanes. I'm not, I'm not a fighter pilot, but I watched these triangle shaped UFOs move around the sky miles in an instant. But it was like they were playing. It was like they were, I mean, I saw it. I watched multiple UFOs that were the triangle ones with the three lights. I watched them for 3 hours and absolutely saw them.
3
Eh,
hours.
3 hours. Yeah, they don't, they're
Wow.
there. They just don't leave. And I don't mean they're right above you. I didn't have anything come close to me. I've had stories told to me by people who have absolutely seen UFOs within like a few hundred feet of their head, crazy stuff. But no, my experience was watching them, and they would move. Like, 1 minute they would be in one spot, and I'm like, no, that's a fleet. No, no, no. I was watching them jump across the sky like it was nothing. And then I'm like, okay, they could be UFO or they could be military. And either way, it's like I got to watch them for 3 hours. And then that's not the only time. I got to work with Hoffman Optics, Alex Hoffman, he supplies Camp Pendleton with all the latest night vision, military grade night vision goggles, and other places. Like, you have to sign a waiver. You can't take these out of the country. And I got to look at the night sky and work with Alex, and over the course of 5 days. And I can tell you that it's basically it's weird, but if you get real night vision goggles, these were 90,000 lume, and you could see into the sky, and it was nuts. again, it starts out a lot like fishing, where you look up and you're like, okay, that's a moth, that's a bird, that's a bat, that's a satellite, that's an airplane. There's a bunch of discerning going on. You got to look. And then after a while, you're like, okay, that's not a satellite. That's not a bat. That's not a bird. That's not lower. I'm watching something very weird move. And then I got to witness them there also. So there is actually, and I don't think this does get brought up enough for people who've had UFO experiences out there or don't or want one. Seriously, get one of these next gen, these 3 or 4 gen. I'm not saying go out and spend $3,000 to $6,000 for a pair of night vision goggles. There is likely the possibility that you might have a friend that has them. If there's other places to go, you can share them and rent them or use them. But I got to tell you, it doesn't take long if you want to really look at what's going on up in our sky. It's not just a Tic Tac video from a few years ago, or, oh, here's another military release of a UFO. You are very capable of actually experiencing some pretty crazy, you wouldn't believe it unless you saw it, experience if you want to give some of these night vision goggles, or go out to Big Rock, or if you hear about a place that's in your neighborhood that they say, hey, there's been a lot of UFO activity, give it a chance, go out, check it out for a little bit. But yeah, those are the 2 specific times that I've had personal experiences, and it is pretty crazy. It is pretty
very
trippy.
Curious, man. Very curious. And on the next show, for those of you who are not aware, I've also had 2 encounters with objects in the sky that I have shared that experience on a couple different occasions. I don't recall if I've actually shared it on the show, but we can talk about that in relation to Jared's interesting sightings, because
I'll cite the whole thing out. We could do it in order, like me driving there and everything. We can go through it all when you want. Yeah.
No, that'll be awesome. And I think a lot of people would be interested in hearing that. Myself, I also witnessed on the second sighting would appear to be a triangular craft. On the first, it was a more circular craft. So yeah, we'll go through that. Yeah. And if you obviously can't get the time or the withal to grab some binoculars or some sort of night vision where you can see clear in the sky, just head on over to Third Phase of Moon and you can see some of these sightings firsthand, guys. There's the plug. There you go. Listen, very quickly, Jared, where can we find you? And then we're going to get out of here after that.
Yep.
I don't like saying that. We're going to end the show. No, we're going to finish up after that.
You have a super cool outro. People should stay tuned for that. I think I like it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Notaliens.com. The book, you can buy the book on Amazon. If you're out of country, go to Amazon, just get the book there. You can get it from me. I sign every copy and I send them out. The problem is that if you take them out of country, there's a significant fee at my little local post office to get it to you, but it's totally manageable. I'll make it work. Just email me about it if you'd like one. And otherwise, I co-host on Conflict Radio. I, of course, have stuff in my member area, and I post on Not Aliens on YouTube. And again, the audiobook's getting out there, and the Forbidden Knowledge News Conference is this April 2nd to the 4th. I'm the keynote on this Friday night, and on Saturday I'll be with Jim Willis, 13-time author, having a conference panel. That's on Saturday. But then at the end of May, come find me and Dark Hour here, Michael, at America's Stonehenge, May 1st on Saturday. We're going to be there doing other stuff for part of the week, but really just come May 1st.
Fantastic, man. Here, I'm just looking up. All right. So thank you very much, Jared. I appreciate you being here once again with us for the 4th appearance here. This has been fantastic. It's, of course, just like every other time. I never want to end it, but it'll be a great thing to jump back because you're here every month, a couple times, aren't you now?
Yeah. So now we can start, like Michael won't even be counting soon. We'll just be like, hey, it's our regularly scheduled program.
Exactly. Welcome to our regularly scheduled program. Stay tuned.
You're going Jurassic Pot up next.
Oh my God, that was hilarious. Well, once again, man, thank you very much. I'm just going to take you off for a moment and hang out, of course, as you normally do, and we'll get to that. But thank you once again, my friend.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, guys. That was amazing. And I never have any less of an expectation when I step into the studio, knowing that Jared is going to be there with me. The conversation is just fantastic. And I am very grateful that I can keep up with him and his research, because his expertise, as you can very well see, is quite far reaching. Now, that being said, yes, we are going to be doing this event on May 1st. I won't reiterate too much of what's been said, but if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll be more than happy to provide you with the details. In addition, I mentioned earlier, we have Manny from Area 503 coming on April 1st. Okay. Tomorrow I have Steve Herman, who's a world-renowned psychic, and oddly enough, worked very closely with my mentor of many, many years, the very first woman who ever read me. So this is going to be very interesting. Unfortunately, she is no longer around, having passed away about 3 years ago. But here's a connection and a link to my past. And of course, this individual will have much to share in the way of experience. Please don't miss that one. All right. In addition, we also have next week coming up with Zelia. Oh God, I can't remember her last name. Let me look it up real quick. Zelia Edgar. Okay. She is a ufologist, and she is very, very versed in the paranormal world. She was on with us on Black Lotus sometime last month, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago. Fantastic woman, very knowledgeable, and very concise with her responses and intellect. So please don't miss that one tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. We'll be here. And that being said, folks, thank you very much for all the super chats tonight. It really helps out, and I appreciate all of your condolences in respect to the situation that we've just gone through. And I will go ahead and boomerang that back out to all those who are experiencing something like this in these tough times. Just hang in there and we'll get through. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Once again, appreciate you being here. And moderators, thanks for being here as well, guys. Appreciate each and every one of you. Valerian the Mac, congratulations on that blue wrench, my friend. You deserve it, as well as everybody else on the team. All right, guys, we're going to get out of here for the evening. God, I've been on Black Lotus too long. I'm using the same verbiage here. We're going to close out the show, and we'll be back tomorrow night. I hope all of you have a fantastic, magical, and interesting rest of your evening. Ciao. Remember to hit the subscribe, like, and share.